Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. So where we're going to be picking up is on page 46. And we're in the chapter We Agnostics. And where we left off last week is we were talking about the experiences that almost each and every one of us bring when we come to the rooms of 12 step. And what we were talking about was the barriers that we have to belief in a power greater than ourselves. And we spoke about some of them. Some of them were things like religious trauma. Some of them were things like, I can't understand or comprehend or define this power. Some of it was the idea that I have of a power just doesn't feel sufficient. Some of it was like, I care about how I look and I don't want to look weak or stupid or religious or lame or uncool. And then I spoke about how I've been uncool my whole life. Uh, and then we spoke about, well, there have been terrible people who have done terrible, horrific things in the name of a higher power, in the name of religion. And then we sort of looked at that idea, if there is a God, why? If there is a God, why is there pain? Why is there suffering? Why is there war? Why is there famine? If there is a God, why? And so that was what so many of us are bringing to this power, to this idea that there could be a power greater than ourselves. And then what we saw was what began to open us up to the belief that maybe, just maybe, there could be a power greater than ourselves. And it was described in this book as this enchanted by a starlit night, this feeling of awe and wonder. And if we can ask ourselves, have we ever had that? Have we ever been out in nature? And I was chatting with somebody earlier today, and he was looking up where I live is right by Banff, right by Lake Louise, right by some of the most beautiful parts of the Rocky Mountains, and it is incredible. And it's like literally in my backyard. And do I go? No, not as often as I should for somebody who lives so close. But like when you drive out to the mountains, like it takes your breath away. Like just it's humbling as these like mountains like stretch up before you. Like it's incredible, and it happens every single time. And for those of you that live by the ocean, you know what it's like to just see have your breath taken away by the beauty and the majesty and the power of the ocean. And so what holds us back are these old ideas, these old conceptions that I have in my mind. But what begins to open me up is experience. Now, for our purposes today, the experience that all that I need to have opened up is that experience of coming to the rooms of 12 step and seeing those happy jerks. You know, those ones that are like happy and sober at the same time, and they're enjoying their stupid life. You know, that one where it's like, yeah, and all I need to believe is that they have better things to do than lie about their experience. Because what really opens me up to this belief that there could be a power greater than myself? How you guys seem to have something, and I don't got anything. And I can see that you have something. So that's what begins, at least for me, to open me up. So getting into where we're actually diving back into the reading, it says, yes, we of agnostic temperament. And that's, to be honest, that is so much all of us when we come here. You know, that struggling and wrestling with that, could there be a conception? I shouldn't say all of us, but I will say many of us. And as we read last week, it was about half, 50% of the original members of Alcoholics Anonymous who struggled with a belief in God. So it says, yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. This is our experience. Let us make haste to reassure you. So we quickly want to like say, hey, we get you. We've been there. Don't worry. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice, so lay aside prejudice. To lay aside prejudice is simply to set aside my old ideas and the ideas that I have about a power that I don't yet have had an experience with. That's what prejudice is, to have opinions about something I've not had an experience with. And actually, I'm going to tie it in. We were talking a lot about hockey before the meeting got started. Go sports. Uh, and some of us might be diehard Flyers fans, which is not as hard as being a diehard Leafs fan. My heart goes out to you. But you know what it is like to experience the thrill, the excitement, the heartbreak that is the sport of hockey. Now, there are those here who have not seen it and don't have any really experience with hockey. And all I need to do is lay aside what I think about hockey, lay aside what I believe about hockey, and have an experience. Let's watch a game, you know? I won't put you in net. You're probably not wanting to take the pucks to the face. We won't take the pucks to the face spiritually. But that's what we're after, is we're after an experience. So all I need to do is just lay aside my old ideas for now. For now, just lay them aside for now. And it says, and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves. And I want to point out that that P is capitalized, capital P, because what are we talking about? We're talking about God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. So believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commence to get results. The results come with just starting with the idea that there could be a power. Maybe Rob is not lying about his love for hockey. Maybe Ben is not making up the San Jose Sharks. Why would they have a hockey team in San Jose? And why would they be called the Sharks? What does that have to do with an ice-based game? What? That can't be real. All I need to do is not gaslight Ben and just trust that he has had an experience. God bless them. They haven't been doing well. Not for a while. And so that is enough. So if we're here today and we could say, all right, maybe Rob, maybe Maureen, but yeah, the Stampeders, that's hockey. That's not hockey. That's Canadian football. That's very obscure, and you should get credit for that reference. But sorry, sports. But all I need to believe is just like Rob and Maureen and Ben have a passion about hockey. And maybe I don't have that passion. Maybe I don't understand it. Maybe I don't get it. All I need to believe is that they are not lying about their experience. And it's the exact same thing when we come to the rooms at 12 Step and people are talking about God. Maybe, just maybe, they aren't lying about their experience. And that is all I need to do to start. That's it. And it says, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that capital P power, which is God, I am not being asked to define it. I'm not being asked to. I don't need to define it. I don't need to comprehend it, which is to say it, understand this power intellectually. In fact, even those of us who have been on this spiritual journey for many, many years, who have been diligent in spiritual practices, I shouldn't say no human power, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say no human power. And if you want to argue with me, absolutely. We're not going to do it like a hockey fight. I mean, drop the gloves. We're not doing that. IFC's fighting anything or even anyone, even the defensive line, like pew pew, not punching people. But that idea of I don't believe that there is any human power that can comprehend that power which is God intellectually. That is an impossible task. I'm not asked to comprehend this power through my mind and my mental faculties. What I am being asked to do is experience this power. I'm asked to have an experience with it. Not formulate ideas or opinions, because as we saw, that's what's holding me back. But to lay those aside and to just start with the base that there could be a power, and that's it. And from that as a baseline, I'm going to build a relationship. I'm going to take a course of action. Spoilers, the rest of the 12 steps. I know. I should have left it on a cliffhanger. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the rest of the 12 steps, and that is going to build a relationship and an experience with that power. I just need to believe that there could be a power as a place to start. That's all we're doing. So I'm not going to be asked to define it, and I'm not going to be asked to comprehend it as in come to an intellectual understanding. What I'm after is experience. And I'm going to hammer that home again and again and again, because that's what I need. Bear with me. Oh man, I'm off on this tangent. Somebody stop me. It's really Rob. He's the only co-host at the moment, unless Emily wanted co-host. I forgot to ask before the meeting. He's the only one that can stop me. All the power to Rob. But here's the deal. If you're somebody like me, you know when you need a drink, you know, before you got here, and you needed a drink. Let's say you showed up and you needed a drink, or you went to the bar and you sat down at the bar and you're like, I need a drink. And if the bartender turned to you and said, well, yes, let me describe to you the flavor, the taste, the effect of alcohol, let me intellectualize alcohol, you would be like, buddy, give me a drink. Because I'm after the experience with alcohol. I'm not after the intellectual idea of alcohol. I'm after the experience. And it's just like that here. I'm not after an idea. I'm after an experience. I just need to believe that it could exist as a starting place. So it says, much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. So we don't need to grab a hold of somebody else's God if we don't want to. If you want to, amazing, go for it. I always say, like, if you're struggling, feel free to borrow mine. Mine loves you so flippin' much, you have no idea. There's nothing you can do about it. Just accept the love. Or don't. You pick your own conception. But we don't need to discover another's conception of God. Our own conception. And I love this line, however inadequate, because I came to the second step feeling so frustrated because the conception that I had felt inadequate, and of course it is inadequate. At step 2, it is simply an idea. It is not sufficient, but I just need to start with there could be one, and I'm building that relationship. So our own conception, however inadequate, however much it doesn't feel like it's enough, was sufficient to make the approach and to affect a contact with him. The approach, what I want to emphasize is step 2 is not the finish line. It's not like, I've figured out God. Amazing. No, it's the starting blocks of a lifelong race that's never done. I am simply beginning from here. And from this place, I'm going to affect a conscious contact. It will come, but I'm not going to have it at step 2. So it says, as soon as we admitted the possible existence. We can be real loosey-goosey with a conception at the beginning that there maybe could be. I don't need to understand, comprehend, define, write it. Could there be one? The possible existence. That is more than enough. And it says of a capital C, capital I, creative intelligence, a capital S, capital U, spirit of the universe, underlying the totality of things. We began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. And coming to that belief that there could be a possible existence of a power greater than myself, that's all that is asked of me in step 2. And anytime I see these words capitalized, these are words that I get to use instead of God. Because if you're like me and I didn't like that word, came with baggage, I didn't like it, great, don't use it. Use creative intelligence, use power, use spirit of the universe. Do that if you want to do that. I will say it's many words and a lot of syllables. So I just out of efficiency started to use the word God. So I spoke about that last week. I won't go on that tangent again. But we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction. That possessed of a new sense of power and direction, what we were talking about there is a spiritual awakening. That is a sneaky description of a spiritual awakening. Some of y'all know that's my favorite. I love my sneaky prayers. I love my sneaky promises. And I love my sneaky descriptions of a spiritual awakening. And there is one right there. And if you're like, girl, I don't believe you. You're making things up. Is hockey even real? Well, hold on. Here's how we know this to be true. Because it happens provided we took other simple steps. What are the other simple steps? It is the rest of the 12 steps is a way of life, like my life depends on it because it does. And the result of the 12 steps is a spiritual awakening, which is a new sense of power and direction. And that possessed as in it comes over me. That's what we're talking about. And so to get that spiritual awakening, I just got to believe, okay, maybe. That's it. Okay, maybe is more than enough for a step 2. So it says, to us, we found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. I need to seek God. And how I seek this power is I work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it because it does. That is how I seek this power. And it's like this idea, if I slightly start to begin to move towards this power will come. I will have an experience of this power, but I've got to take that first step. I know somebody who says God is a gentleman. Like it's gonna have to wait to be invited. But I also had the realization that that's how vampires work. Vampires, you have to invite them in. So, I mean, if you're spiritual, I promise the spiritual journey is better than the Twilight series. Unless you're a huge fan of Twilight, in which case I'm not going to yuck your yum. You do you, boo. Enjoy it. And if that's a place to start, do it. But the idea is I've got to seek. And I have got to build this relationship with this power. And it says to us, the realm of spirit, capital R, capital S, is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. Earnestly seek. So it is open to every single one of us. What does that mean? The spiritual awakening is available for you. A relationship with this power is available for you. An acquiescence of this power is available for you here and now. The only thing that is asked of you is to seek, and to seek earnestly. I think it's Sandy Beach who spoke about the different levels of seeking that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or whatever 12-step fellowship you're a part of. The first level of seeking is maybe a little familiar if you have children of any age, and that is where they cannot find their socks, and you have placed them on the foot of their bed, and they're like, I can't find my socks. So there's that level of seeking, and how often do we come to the rooms and we have that level of seeking where it's like, I'm not even willing to look, and we're surprised that we don't find. And then there's like kind of the level of seeking that happens with the kiddos on something like Easter, where they got to run around and they'll seek for a little bit, but then they'll get bored of it and just want to sit in the corner, eat chocolate, And the level of seeking that is required is far more diligent. It is a way of life. I need to seek this power on a daily basis. But what I don't know when I begin this process is that I've got to becomes I get to build a relationship with this power. I get to know this power more. I get to feel this new sense of power and direction more. I get led more. My life gets better beyond anything I could have imagined, contingent on my willingness to seek this power on a daily basis. And it says, it is open, we believe, to all men, all people. And you know what that means? That means you can recover. Some of y'all know that is a hill, and I'm dying on it. You can recover. You can get well. Yes, you can. Yes, you can have a spiritual experience. Fight me. I'll drop the gloves on that one. I won't. We use our words in 12-step. Uh, but yeah, you can recover. That is the takeaway. If you're here today, you can recover. If you're here today and you've not had a spiritual experience, if you've not had a spiritual awakening, I want you to know it is available for you. And that is a hill that I die on. It is available to each and every one of us. And so it says, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. So whatever conception that you have in the here and now, beautiful. That's more than enough. And that is where we're going to start. It says this applies too to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. We get to ask ourselves what these things mean to us. We get to build a relationship with these things. Do not let any prejudice, again, prejudice, to prejudge, to have an opinion about something I have no experience with. Do not let any prejudice that you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. What does prayer look like for me? What does meditation look like for me? What does a power greater than myself look like for me? I get to ask myself. Now, I always, with my sponsees, I offer them some gentle, basic guidelines as a place to start. But man, it gets to grow, and I get to seek new experiences. And I'm big on that because I couldn't stay well on one drink. I couldn't stay well on one pill. And I sure as heck couldn't stay well on one hoot of crack. And I don't stay well on one spiritual experience. I get to continue to seek them. And so it says, at the start, this was all we needed to commence, which is to say, begin. This is the very, very, very beginning. Commence spiritual growth. Not spiritual, the end, all done. Growth. That is the name of the game. Like, it's spiritual progress. How am I growing spiritually? To affect our first conscious relation with God as we understood him. And I spoke about this last week. We're in the chapter, We Agnostics. Agnostic is Greek. Ag is without, and gnosis means knowledge. But I want to implore you, it is not a head knowledge, it is a heart level experiential knowing. When you read books that are referred to as the Gnostic texts, or books that are Gnostic, or people that were Gnostic, man, they are people that were after experience, not intellectual ideas. Now, conscious, the word conscious is Latin in origin. Con means with, and shus or sire means knowing. So I go from, at this point, without knowing, to I am going to take a course of action to build a with knowing of this power, with knowing relationship, or relation with God, as we understood him. And again, I spoke about this last week, but I just want to reiterate it. The word understand, I got a 1930s dictionary. And in my 1930s dictionary, understand says to know through experience. That's how I understand God. Not through here, right? A lot of times we'll come to meetings and people are like, oh, God of my misunderstanding, or if I could understand God, it couldn't be God. But when we look at that word as in to know through experience, that is something that is attainable, to experience this power. So to affect our first conscious relation with God as we understood him, this is where we're starting. And it says, afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which seemed entirely out of reach. So if we're feeling like, man, I don't know how to overcome some of these barriers, don't worry about it. That's what the rest of the steps are here to help you with. And when I say don't worry about it, it's not like we're going to be leaving it for a long time. Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out in a couple months. No, we'll have a look at that stuff in step 4. And step 4 is right around the corner. In fact, it's just a decision away. We're almost there. I mean, by almost there, I mean in terms of actually taking the actions. It takes me a little while to talk through the book because I go on tangents. I know that's a surprise to all of you. Paige, she would never. She's got quite the attention span. Lies and slander. All right. So afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth. But if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. So our growth, where we're starting from, is here and now. And if you can say that there maybe could be a power, boom, that's it. We're growing from this point on. Now it says we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a capital P power greater than myself? And so if you're writing in your book, you can make a little note that this is step 2, part 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little screen share. Oh, my head's kind of in the way. Woo! Woo! Step 2, part 1. Let me see if I can raise it up so I'm out of the way. I don't know if that made any difference, but step 2. This is step 2. And when we look at step 2, as it's written on page 59, or written on the scroll, or shared on the Zoom screen, it said, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves. So step 2, part 1, all that is asked of me, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? That is it. Is it possible that there could be a power greater than myself? Can I believe that there are people who drank like me, who used like me, who struggled in the way that I struggled, who are free today, and that a power worked in their life? Can I believe that? Can I believe that there is a power that brings in the tides? Can I believe that there is a power that allows the trees to change with the season? Can I believe that there is a power that is greater than me? And I promise you, by the time I got here and I got to this point, I just admitted my alcoholism, my addiction, my codependency, my gambling, my whatever brings you to this study. I just admitted at this point that this was a power greater than myself. So it's not too hard to suspect that there could be another. So do I now believe? Are we even willing to believe? Do we see, man, that bar is ADA compliant. It's right on the ground. It's barrier free, you guys. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? That is it. That is it. And if all I'm believing is that some jerk like Paige who's going to natter on for an hour about this thing probably has better things to do, actually, that's a hard sell, that I have better things to do. So what we're going to believe is that Rob has better things to do. And we know that's true because he's got the hockey and like other important things in his life. So can I believe that these people have better things to do than show up and lie about their experience? That's it. And it says, as soon as a man can say he does believe, or is even willing to believe, we emphatically assure him with emphasis. We'll put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, with emphasis, that he is on his way. On his way. We're not stopping here. This bang, the gun that starts the race, we're starting from here. And it says, it has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. And the cornerstone is that stone upon which a building is symbolically built upon. So not the full foundation, but that cornerstone. It is that stone that is laid that is the symbolic place from which a building is constructed. And I want to point out, it is a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. If it is not effective, it's not spiritual. And I promise you, the spiritual life is incredibly effective. It is incredibly practical, and it is far more tangible than it feels like. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, try to solve your problems on your own. And then come to the end of yourself and try some inventory and see how annoyingly well that works. I know, it's the worst. Yay. That's just me on the other side. It's like, heck yeah, taking it through the columns, baby. It is incredibly effective. And when I think of this incredibly wonderful and effective spiritual structure can be built, you know what we don't have to build? Do you guys remember Winnie the Pooh Eeyore? You lost my tail. Man, that was me when I got here. I was spiritually Eeyore. I lost my willingness. You know, and it had to be hammered back into me, just like Christopher Robin with the tail. But if you guys remember, Eeyore, where did he live? He lived in this shack of sticks, but which I'm just off on this tangent. That could part of be why he was so depressed. I mean, he was essentially homeless and it kept falling down. What we don't need to build is an Eeyore house. This like ramshackle structure that's barely hanging on and that's falling down again and again and again. And if you don't like religious imagery, you don't have to do this, but imagine building a cathedral, you know, like a Winchester Cathedral or a Notre Dame Cathedral. Or if you've ever seen some of those amazing, incredible, intricately, like some mosques are beautiful, like a mosque that is ornate, that is like you can build, or if you're like, I don't like any of that, you can build whatever structure that you want. If you're, listen, if you are into some of that Soviet era brutalist architecture, good for you. And you can build that. But we get to build a structure that is beautiful, that is effective, that works, and that is not a little Eeyore shack. We get to aim higher. And so that's step two, part one. And I think the first time I did this, every single time there was an asterisk that said, be sure to read appendix 2. I had this running joke where I would be like, don't tell me what to do, asterisk. I do what I want. Y'all don't know me. We're not doing that. But I think this big book study, I totally forgot to make that joke. So just imagine the whole time I'm like, don't tell me what to do, asterisk. You don't know me. I do what I want. I'll turn to the appendix whenever I want. Uh, and uh, and so let's have a look at the asterisk. It says, please be sure. And on Fridays, Terry and I talk about, like Terry, we were talking about how he's got ADD, addict defiance disorder. You know, you tell me what to do, I do the opposite. I get you, Terry. Pew pew. But I'll point out it says please. Well, okay, because you asked me so nicely, let's pop over. Let's go have a look at appendix 2 on the spiritual experience. Fine. So let's pop over. We're going to page 567. 567. Hold on. You can tell I didn't have it keyed up. 567 spiritual experience. And then I'm going to have a little pause so that everyone has an opportunity. I always make this joke, perhaps a pregnant pause. I'm just kidding. We can't wait 9 months. Alrighty. Page 567, spiritual experience. So it says the term spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book. Now, what I will point out is in the way in which they're described in this first paragraph. Actually, I'll read the first paragraph and then explain it. The term spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which, upon careful reading, shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. And so how I take that is the idea that a spiritual awakening and a spiritual experience are just synonyms. Or I have a spot to see that says synonyms. Synonyms. Now I can't even do it wrong or right. It's all wrong over here. But it's a word that means the same thing as the other word. They're just words pointing to the same thing. A psychic change, a spiritual, it's synonyms anonymous. Yeah. Heck yeah, which is probably has way more colorful language and is probably more focused than Tangents Anonymous. Wee! But spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, entire psychic change, for me, they're just synonyms. They're just the same frickin' thing. A personality change that is sufficient to overcome alcoholism. Same thing. Conscious contact, same thing. Fourth dimension, same thing. But there are people who like to differentiate and like to distinguish. And if you want to do that, cool, do that. Like straight up. There are people that now listen, I am pedantic, but I always think I'm pedantic with purpose. But there are people who are like, well, an experience is this flash of lightning and awakening happens more gradually. And if you believe that or you take that approach genuinely, like awesome. That's awesome. But I also believe that they are interchangeable. Because in the original manuscript, um, step 12 said having had a spiritual experience. And now today it says having had a spiritual awakening. Oh, this is a little copy of the original manuscript, how it works. That's why I grabbed it. Just in case you're like, what is she grabbing for? Her hopes and dreams, or the last thread of sanity before it wisps away. Probably that one. But also that. So for me, they are just synonyms. We're just pointing to the same thing. And we're talking about the spiritual awakening, that change that relieves from me the obsession of the mind. And how that happens is it treats the spiritual malady. The spiritual malady, not limited to alcoholics, not limited to addicts, but that spiritual malady is a conscious sense of separateness from God. And I treat that from a conscious contact with this power, and how I get that as a spiritual awakening that happens as the result of the 12 steps. So it says, yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences. Do you see how they're called so many different things? And it's really trying to say, like, hey, whatever flavor ice cream you have, we're still talking about the same thing. Or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. So it's that saying, like, just because you haven't had a white light spiritual experience does not mean you haven't had a spiritual awakening or spiritual experience. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. And the sudden revolutionary changes that we see that are the most prominent are Bill Wilson's. Bill Wilson's white light spiritual awakening, where it's a spiritual awakening of the luminous variety. It's luminous phenomenon. And I'm going to reference that. Yeah, luminous phenomenon. Something like a phenomenon. That's all I know of that song. But I reference that in particular because we're going to talk a lot about varieties of religious experience in this part of the book, in this, like, today, as we're trying to round the corner and finish off this big book study. We're talking about varieties of religious experience. And in varieties of religious experience, that white light spiritual awakening is described as a type of experience. And it's of the luminous phenomena. And you can look that up and read about people who have had experiences just like that in varieties of religious experience, which is known as light casual reading. Yeah, I got some looks when I said that. I'm joking. But in his spiritual awakening, it was this white light, and he can see himself in his mind's eye on top of a mountain, and a wind of spirit blows through him. But the elements of the spiritual awakening were a sense of victory, a feeling of peace and serenity, of feeling lifted up as though his problem had been solved. And that is available for all of us. When we finish this chapter, which is going to take a little while at the pace that I'm going, we're going to read about my homie, Fitz Mayo, and his spiritual experience where it says, who are you to say there is no God? And he was overcome by the conviction of the presence and power of this power that was with him. And so it's saying that, like, hey, that does not happen to everyone. So it says in the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. And so even though it doesn't have to be sudden, but that's the elements of sort of what we're talking about. A God consciousness and a vast change in how I feel and how I see and how I show up to life. And it says, among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations though frequent, are by no means the rule. Which means that no, not everyone has one like that. But I'm gonna go off on that here in a bit. Oh, she's going on a tangent. We feeling it. She's a little tangent in here. Woo! So it says most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. And what is interesting about that is in varieties of religious experiences, the phrase and the terminology and the reference to educational variety doesn't exist. It's not in there. By the way, that's what got me to read the book. Is I was at a meeting and somebody chatted, did you know that's not in varieties of religious experiences? And I was like, ooh, I gotta find out. I gotta have tell me more about that, right? And so that type of experience is not mentioned. Bear with me with that. And here's the thing is oftentimes we grab a hold of educational variety and we confuse educational variety with intellectual variety. And I cannot get to a spiritual awakening through intellect. I have to get to that spiritual awakening through action. And here's my experience, is that the spiritual awakening that I have is absolutely none of my business. It's none of my business. And just like I couldn't stay well on one drink, I cannot stay well on one experience. So I've got to go after and seek it. But here's something, and I've been talking a lot about this lately, so please forgive me if you've heard me make this metaphor a whole bunch and you're bored of it. I know I am, but it's too good not to use. So is anyone here had this experience when you're drinking, where you take out a glass? I know I've lost some of you already with the glass, and you get your bottle, whatever it is you're drinking, you open it up and you pour it into the glass. And then you go and you get some ice, and you put your ice in your drink, and you stir it around just real good. You give it a good stir. You stir it around, and you have a little bit of a sip, and then you set it down. And then you socialize or you do other things, and that ice begins to melt, and there's a layer of water just at the top. Anyone here ever drink like that, or are we all annoyed? Just like, oh, get it in you, girl. Just, we all know what it's like to be at a restaurant where somebody is like, oh, they're sipping it. You know what I mean? And here's the thing. How did we drink? Well, I had to get it in me. Get it in me. That's how I smoked. That's how I popped pills. Get it in me. I was after it. But you see, a lot of times we come to the rooms and we don't get after these 12 steps. We take ill-informed advice of take your time. You know, why don't rush into anything? You know, just, basically work a step a month, work a step a year, don't go too quickly. And that is erroneous. That doesn't work. But you can also imagine the longer that I take, and I'm not talking about being thorough. I want to emphasize when I talk about going through this thing quickly, I also mean thoroughly, to really dive in and go thorough, but to do it quickly, to go after this thing, just as I was going after a drink, just as after I was going after a Huda crack. Just as I would, anyone here ever be in a toxic codependent relationship? Just as we were getting after them to text us back, going after it. Going after it. You see, what happens is we often are working the steps as if we were trying to sip our drink, and we don't get the effect because I'm not going after it. If I work a 9th step and I don't make another amends for a month, am I going to feel the freedom? As if I am in there like cranking out amends and getting it done. I have a friend of mine I was helping, by which I mean dragging through the steps with consent, and he had in about a week or so he had made I think it's about 14 days he had made 8 amends. He had about 30 on his list. He had made 8 amends, and a lot of people would be like, "That is really good," and I was the big jerk that's like, we need you to go reach out to 10 more. let's go, let's go, let's go. You know, because but like there's a sense of urgency because it is a race. But if I go after it, I'm going to have an experience. But if I take my time and start trouncing through the tulips, I'm not going to have this experience. There's no need to dawdle. And the awakenings that are happening that are talking about gradual conversion, some of them do happen more slowly. But the gradual conversion, to my recollection, as it's been described in that book, is ones that have happened over the course of like weeks, not months or years. But again, there's no glass ceiling on this. And actually, hold on. He talks about what makes the difference between a sudden and a gradual convert is not necessarily the presence of divine miracle in the case of one and something less divine in that of the other, but rather a simple psychological peculiarity. In fact, namely, that in the recipient of the more instantaneous grace, we have one of those subjects who are in possession of a large region in which mental work can go on subliminally, and from which invasive experiences abruptly upsetting the equilibrium of the primary consciousness may come. And that's what I mean. It is light summer reading. You know what I mean? You just want to like sit on the beach and ride. So what's it saying? It's like if there are people who have sudden experiences, it is not that God is more present in those and God doesn't love those where it's a little more slow, a little more gradual. It's like, hey, you might have a personality where maybe you don't need a shaboom one and you need it to work more subtly underneath. But again, the experiences that are studied and talked about in varieties of religious experiences are not, it took me 6 months to do a 4th step. That's not what he's talking about. Of course, he's not referencing the 12 steps. They didn't exist at that time. But he was talking about these powerful experiences. And again, let's go after it. Let's go after it. So he didn't call them educational variety. Gradual conversion, you can find, gradual conversion. It's found in lecture 10, I guess, because I made that note. So lecture 10, very excited. I think actually there was at one time we were joking about, because Rob put in the chat one time, it was it Twice Born, the chapter on Twice Born that was most applicable for us? And I was like, that's not applicable to me. It's chapter 2 on saintliness. I remember having a joke with Rob about that. And I'm like, no, I'm just kidding. I'm the chapter on the sick soul. There's a chapter on that. Oh, goodness. All right. So it says, because they develop slowly over a period of time, quite often friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. So here are the elements of a spiritual awakening as described in the spiritual experience. 1, he finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration to his reaction to life. So how I show up to life has been a profound change. That's part 1. 2, that such a change could have hardly been brought about by himself alone. He couldn't have done it on his own or made it happen. 3, what often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. So again, what happens as a result of writing inventory and making amends is something I couldn't have ever produced on my own power. 4, with few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a capital P power greater than themselves. So those are the 4 ideas of what they're describing, elements of a spiritual awakening. So it says most of us think that this awareness of a capital P power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness, that with knowing. Most emphatically, right? We're going to put the emphasis on the correct syllable this time, with emphasis. Emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic, That's you. Even if you're an addict or compulsive, whatever, any you, anyone, all of you, yes, you. Fight me on this. Drop the gloves. Let's go. You. Honestly, any capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover. Yes, that's you. You can get well. Yes, that's you. You can recover. Yes, that's you. Provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. It is an attitude that will keep me stuck. That attitude of there could be no power. I'm not willing to seek that power. I'm not willing to take action. That is the attitude that will keep somebody like me stuck in the bonds of self and like locked in the gates of hell. So it says, we find that no one, that means y'all, no one, all of us, we can do this. No one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. So what they're saying is what is essential for recovery is to be willing, honest, and open-minded, but that those ideas are indispensable. So not only are they essential, they are things that we cannot go without. And I know it's a bit of awkward phrasing, and I think that awkward phrasing is to emphasize and re-emphasize how important these things are. But I'll point something out. Bill Wilson in his story, I gotta land the plane soon, which means stop talking quickly. But in Bill's story, when bottom of page 13, you don't have to fully like bounce around here if you don't want to. But bottom of page 13, if you just want to listen, you can. My friend promised. This is Abby Thatcher making the promise to Bill, which is the same promise to us, that when these things were done, these 12 steps, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. And it says, and so these are the essential requirements that were given from Abby Thatcher to Bill Wilson to us. Belief in the power of God. I don't even got to believe in God. I got to believe in the power. Plus enough willingness. Notice that one comes first. Willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. So we see that there's some slight differences, but ultimately some similarities. So and we spoke about, going back to page 568, we spoke about the characteristics of a spiritual experience as described in the appendix, varieties of spiritual, the appendix spiritual experiences. But in varieties of religious experiences from William James, there are 4 characteristics of a spiritual experience. I'll just share those with you in case you find them interesting. So the first quality is that it is ineffable. And ineffable is indescribable. What that means is to be experienced, to be understood. Ineffable. Somebody else spell that and put it in the chat for you. Not me. Sorry, Rob. Sorry, you're like trying to do other important things. And I'm like, here's a random task. So ineffable, to be experienced, to be understood. And that is why when we talk about spiritual things, we talk a lot in metaphors, we talk a lot in synonyms, we talk a lot in similes, because we are trying to describe the indescribable. We are trying to describe the scent of a rose. Imagine trying to describe the scent of a rose to somebody who has never smelt it. Right? That's what we're talking about. And the easiest thing is like, girl, just have an experience. That's what we're after. The second is that it is noetic. To be noetic means that it reveals divine truths that we could not otherwise know. And you may be like, girl, is God going to tell me the lotto numbers? Is that what you're saying? No, but yeah. Because what God, the noetic divine truth that I could not always otherwise know, the mental obsession is gone. I don't need to take a drink. I don't need to smoke crack. That I could not know on my human power. Divine truths. And I'll share it with you, another divine truth that was revealed to me. That you might be like, oh, girl, what is she, a weirdo? Yes, accurate. But that I'm not the biggest piece of garbage that ever lived. That's something I genuinely need the spirit of the universe to come down and crack me open, to awaken to the reality of God's unconditional love for me. That's noetic. I couldn't have known. I remember one day I was, we're going a little over. I'm so sorry, guys. I always try to end on time. But do I succeed? Well, more often than not at this big book study. Not today, failure. But I remember I was on the phone with a sponsee one time, and she was genuinely crying tears of gratitude, which does not happen that often. No, it does. It does. I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. But she was genuinely crying tears of gratitude. And I'm not somebody that's like super great at receiving compliments, but I've gotten better over the years. But as she was thanking me, there was something that came from inside of me that it really wasn't my words. And what I said to her was, everything good in me is God. Everything good in me is God. Man, I don't know that, right? Where did that come from? That didn't come from me. And so the other effect of it is that it is transient. So the experience itself comes and it goes. But here's what's important: the effects remain. The effects remain. So the experience of God, it'll pass. That's why this is not a set it and forget it thing. I've got to continue. Bill Wilson, white light on the mountaintop, clean wind blowing through and through. Next page, right across the thing, plagued by waves of self-pity. But the effects remain. And in Varieties of Religious Experience, I don't know what chapter it is, and I definitely don't know what page it is. He talks about people who have had these experiences. And even if there's been backsliding in behavior, because he's not really, he talks about some alcoholics, but it's not really about alcoholics. It's about people who've had profound spiritual experiences. Even if there's been some backsliding, or there has never been a falter in this belief that there has been a power that has worked in their life because they've had an experience. Actually, man, okay. So, gosh, I talk a lot. There's this thing in the developmental stages of babies called object permanence. And I know, I'm like way over time, and you're like, you're going on an object permanence tangent. I know, I'm so sorry. I'm really trying to end the plane, land it. But there's this thing. Part of why babies find peekaboo to be the greatest is because when they no longer see an object, they no longer believe it exists. They do not have object permanence. It very literally is out of sight, out of mind. And part of the stage of development is realizing that, oh, just because mom put the toy behind her back doesn't mean the toy is still there, to realize the toy still exists. But so often, those of us on the spiritual journey, we do not mature spiritually enough to develop spiritual object permanence. I'm not getting my way in this exact moment. There is no God. Or I'm not seeing the immediate results of things. There is no God. And we've got to continue to grow spiritually to develop that object permanence, to know that, like, yeah, life's going to have some ups and downs, and God is as with me in the challenges and available to me in the challenges as to the, when the toy's right in front of me, toy or no toy. All right. Four, passivity. The fourth characteristic, as described by William James, is passivity, which means that I am not able to control its departure or its arrival. It happens to me. And here in Alcoholics Anonymous, we have the ability to create it and replicate it every single time, but it happens to me. So it goes on to say, there is a principle which is bar against all information. Oh, and I just real quick, part of why I love Varieties of Religious Experience by William James is it connected a whole lot of dots for me. And if you've ever heard meditation didn't mean meditation in the 1930s, Nope, it absolutely existed. And a variety of people are mentioned that had a whole bunch of meditative practices in that book. He doesn't talk about meditation, but I just wanted to explain part of why I love that book so much. Anywho, there is a principle which is bar against all information. So there's a principle which like keeps out all information, which is proof against all arguments. So it'll win every argument, which cannot fail, which means will always keep a man in everlasting ignorance. And that principle is contempt prior to investigation. And that's the idea that I know the steps won't work for me. I know a fourth step couldn't possibly help. I know I don't need to make amends. Contempt prior to investigation, that keeps me in the darkness. That keeps me out of growth and change. And it says Herbert Spencer. But it is not a Herbert Spencer quote. Herbert Spencer, quoted a lot in Varieties of Religious Experience, it's actually, or should be attributed to William Paley. He lived from 1743 to 1805. He was an English clergyman, author, and lecturer. And you're like, girl, how did they make a mistake like that? Well, in the first edition, there was a story by a gentleman by the name of Ray Campbell, and his story was An Artist's Lad. And he designed the cover of the first edition Big Book, as well as the Art Deco cover. And that quote was in his story. And when his story was taken out of the first edition, they liked it. And even though it was misattributed to Herbert Spencer, nobody proofread it or double checked it. And so that is how it ended up here in Varieties of Religious Experiences. Technically incorrect. The third element, I just closed the book. So it is ineffable, noetic, transient. So third was transient, that it comes and then it goes, and then passivity. It happens to me. So, and with that, 6 minutes over, that's not good. I will shush, and I'll stop the recording. Please join us next week when I'll do better than 10 time. Thank you.